it. You just got to do what you got to do. Yeah. We're here, but she's priority number one.
Of course.
And of course, they were all like 1,000%.
Yeah.
Whatever you need.
Yeah.
And in the year that we actually spent that first year, our business grew.
Wow.
It grew, and we increased our income, and it's just like, it just shows how, God provides when you just focus on what's important. And
sometimes you got to let him take the reins, right?
Yeah. And actually, I mean, since then I give them to him a lot more often. Like clearly you got this under control better than I do, so I'm gonna go ahead and let you do that. But we, as she was healing physically, she had a little bit of a drag to her left foot. Like, it wasn't noticeable to anybody but her. And so we would walk every night, and I would make sure she was, being physically active. But a lot of her days were spent sitting on the couch doing nothing and just sort of existing. Yeah. And it was hard to figure out how to get her to move forward and get back to thriving.
Yeah, that's hard.
And, so it was like, okay, hey, you could go do this. You could go for a walk on your own, or like, she wouldn't drive. It took probably a good 2-3 months before she would drive on her own. And the first time she drove on her own, she ran over a curb because she went to make a left-hand turn, and her depth perception was off and just totally drove right over it. Just drove right over it and called me like freaking out. And it was like, okay, you're fine. Do I need to come get you? Are you okay? Like, because I'm very like head down, nothing slows me down. Yeah. Like activator, achiever, just get it done.
Right.
And that's not always a good thing. And like empathy and compassion are oftentimes very low for me. So I would just be like, okay, fine, I'll do it, instead of giving her the space to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right.
And like, one of the first arguments we had after her stroke was, let me do it. And I'm like, okay, are you sure? And it was like, because I felt like I had to do the things to make sure the kids are good and the house was good and the bills are paid and all the things are good. And she was like, let me participate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay. And I kind of realized, like, she would do stuff like, say, laundry or clean, and then it would wipe her out. And then she would get mad because she didn't have the same energy level. And so she would yell at me. And it was like, well, then I'll just do it, because I don't want to be yelled at. Like,
instead of letting her work through it.
Yeah. And at first I thought I was helping her, and then I realized I was being selfish. I didn't want to have to deal with the bullshit.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a sticky situation.
Yeah. It was hard. And so at some point, like, I had to tell her parents, okay, you can't come for a while. Like, you did your job. Thank you. And that's hard, because like, I'm not their kid. It's their kid. And it's like, okay, I think we've crossed over from encouraging and supporting to enabling her. And I think we need to try to get our life back to whatever normal looks like, so that we can figure that out. And so we did that, and it was tricky. It was like, I mean, for a while I would joke that I was a single dad, because like the parenting stuff fell mostly on me, or I would say I have 9 kids instead of 8, because oh my God, that would piss her off.
Yeah, of course. You got to bring at least some humor.
Yeah, she would get so mad, especially like the single parent thing, because
of course,
sometimes she would have to mentally check out, and so yes, I would have to deal with the stuff, but she felt, and then when she told me that, I stopped saying that. Like, I thought I was just being funny or cute and trying to lighten the mood with humor. So I think the biggest thing for us is like the communication, the ability to like sit each other down and go, you're being a jerk, or that really doesn't, I don't find that as funny as you do. And then kind of circling back to what I control, I can look at that and go, okay, I can not do that for you, because I don't want to make you feel bad. And sometimes it's like, hey, you're going to have to figure that out, because that's part of who I am.
Yeah. Like, and you're dealing with everything your own way too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole piece to that of being like the caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm very lucky that a lot of our community, I guess, I don't know if lucky is the right word. I was fortunate that a lot of the people in our community have either gone through trauma similar to this or have like children with special needs or things like that. And so they had a really strong understanding of making sure that the caregiver also gets a break.
Mm-hmm.
So I had friends that came and would, the wife would stay with my wife and he and I would go see a movie just so I could get out of the house. Or we had friends that flew in from Utah to stay with us for a few days so that they could kind of pick up some of the stuff and I could get a break. And it was awesome. It was awesome. But it's such a learning curve in like navigating a relationship with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's amazing. Like I want to go back to the like community that you're around. Like that's obviously something huge. Like to be around that type of. You mentioned that they have kids with special needs and stuff. So like it's amazing how God puts those people in your life and surrounds you with the right kind of people. And I think it's your job to be perceptive of who you let in and who you kick out of your life or whatever. But it's just amazing that you had that type of support.
Yeah, that's interesting perspective on it. I definitely think that the people that we surround ourselves with, like one of the things that we'll say a lot is you rise and fall to the level of the people you surround yourself with. And so we're mindful of that. And honestly, I hadn't looked at it through the lens of like how it's divinely inspired or divinely guided, because you're 100% correct. I mean, the community that we have and the community we had in place at that time was uniquely skilled to help us navigate that period in our life.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is, I mean, my wife's she's a unicorn, and she gets along with everybody. She can really interact and engage with just about anyone on anything, and everybody loves her.
Yeah.
And she's always, both of us have, but I think she shows up in a brighter way when it comes to like how we serve our community. And we have always been service minded.
Sure.
And so, I think you do get what you give. And so,
I'm curious to know where that like mindset or that perspective of giving back to your community comes from. Like how, like you talked about being raised in a like dysfunctional type of a family, and so
sure.
I'm just curious of how all of that ties in together.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I used to think, well, the thing about humanitarian work or philanthropy or service is that those of us who do it on a regular basis do it, if we're being honest, for selfish reasons, because we get more out of it, or we get as much, at least, if not more, than the people that you're serving. Whether that's filling your cup, whether that's, for me, it's, I believe that service is the rent we pay for living on this planet.
Sure.
Like,
I agree.
And, I believe that our Creator died for our sins. And one of the ways that I can repay that debt and live in honor of that is to care for the rest of the flock, so to speak.
Yeah,
sure.
So a lot of that is like, it's me atoning for my own stuff, on a spiritual level. And, I grew up in an abusive home. It was physically violent. It was emotionally abusive. And as a young adult teenager, the way that I expressed that was through, boosting car stereos, being an air, and, handling things in a very, not loving way because I didn't feel love. And so I projected that out into others and was not, I started drinking at 16 and would sneak out and I mean, and that type of lifestyle, that very me first lifestyle, went until my now 21-year-old son was 3. And I didn't quit drinking until he was about 3 years old.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that was me coming to the realization that, like, so some of it is that spiritual atonement, and some of it is like I've done some bad stuff in my life, and now I recognize, like, we have impact on people no matter whether we realize it or not. Me interacting with the cashier at the grocery store is going to leave a mark on that person's day.
Yeah. Either way you interact with them, like either negative or positive, it's going to do the same thing. And it kind of affects people more if you're treating them bad or in a certain way. And might as well just do like you said, cashier at the store, say hi or smile or do something.
Smile.
Yeah.
Call them by name.
Yeah.
If they're wearing a name badge, I always say their name. I'll say, hey, thanks a lot, Shane. Thanks a lot, Keith.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, opt for neutral. If I'm having a bad day, if my kids are on my case, if Carrie and I aren't vibing, I don't need to take it out on that person.
Sure.
And so, so for me, it's really gotten to a place where I believe that we all have impact. I believe that we're all, none of us live in a vacuum. And so I choose as much as possible to make that impact positive. And when I don't have the energy or the mindset to do that, then I just sort of work towards neutral and not being a detriment to their day.
Sure.
And so that's really where that comes from. Like, and my wife, for Carrie, like, her and I have talked about it, because she's got a higher pain tolerance than I do when it comes to, like, a lot of times people will treat you unfairly or inappropriately. And she has a really high threshold for accepting that, because I'm kind of like, I'm done with so-and-so. And she was like, I get it. They acted out of school, or they shouldn't have done that. Yeah. And then like 2 days later, they're going to lunch, and I'm like, how are you still, like, what? And she's like, I just love people, man. Yeah. Like, people are people. So for her, I think for her, she has a different background. It's just a lot more, she just loves humans, and she really knows, like, understands what unconditional love is supposed to look like.
Yeah. That's not easy.
Yeah. No, it's not. Now, I will tell you, once you get to that line with her, you just don't exist anymore.
Yeah. Well, I got to mention something. So it was probably, a year after Carrie had her stroke, my father had his, and you guys reached out. I was still in Colorado in the hospital with my dad, and you guys reached out, and Carrie gave me her protocol, her essential oil protocol, and just that, even though, like, we started to implement stuff, and he did end up passing away a couple weeks after that, due to some other complications that happened, but just the fact that you guys reached out, like, it meant a lot to me. I really did appreciate it, and just wanted to thank you publicly. I don't think I ever have. Thank you guys.
Please, no, we get it, and it's tricky because you talk about giving it to God, right? Like, there's so many people, and she works with a lot of people who've had strokes, and we often she'll share her protocol, she'll share what she knows, and I sort of share my perspective as a caregiver and, like, what you can do or what works for us, what hasn't. And unfortunately, more often than not, it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
And whether that's age or, other things that are part of the health. situation